Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. After just returning from a trip from Europe and seeing our daughter who's spending a year abroad, I was so excited that the new year had come and that Monday Night Football was going to present the equivalent of a playoff game, the Bills against Cincinnati, which had all types of implications. I put my pajamas on, like I usually do for such a Monday night event, and curled up on the couch next to my son, put the game on, and most of you who follow the news know exactly what happened shortly into the first quarter. It was a surreal moment, a fright, a freak accident, and it was scary to watch unfold. We knew that this person, Damar Hamlin, was seriously injured, but we couldn't quite tell how life-threatening indeed it was until the broadcasters had explained that he was receiving life-saving resuscitation, CPR, and was being transported to a hospital. You could also tell by the face of all the players, both from Cincinnati and Buffalo, that it was a very serious case of an injury that did have his life in the balance, one in which caused the game to be postponed, first suspended and then postponed. And frankly, in all my years of watching the NFL, I've never seen that before. I saw it in the wake of 9/11, where the NFL postponed by 1 week for everybody, but that didn't affect players on the field. Growing up in Detroit, I used to go to every game of the Lions. I was even there when Mike Utley sadly became paralyzed, but it didn't end the game. But here, it was a moment that was so painful to watch, of this young man who most people in the world, I don't care how involved you are in football, just weren't very aware of. And now everyone knows who he is and his name. That we all took a knee and prayed for this young, sweet boy from Pittsburgh playing for the Buffalo Bills, Damar Hamlin. Now, what's amazing to me is that in the game of football, there is tremendous trash talking. People from both sides say all types of terrible things to get into the mind and psyche of the other player. And we know that it is a very physical sport, that the idea of hitting a player and the harder you hit them and kind of shaking them up is part of the game. It's part of how you get leverage one player over the next or one team over the next. And we know that there was going to be a fierce battle on the field for who was going to win this game between Buffalo and Cincinnati. But after Hamlin fell, there was no trash talking. There was no hard hitting. There was no sense of one team has to take on the other and win this for home field advantage or for a bye week or for some other thing that would benefit greatly the victor. Instead, you almost couldn't tell if Damar Hamlin wore a Buffalo Bills jersey or a Cincinnati Bengals jersey, because the players were equally distraught and shook by that moment. They all prayed together. Those who were part of the medical personnel on the Bengals team came over to help and assist in any way possible with the Bills player who was hurt. And of course, the Cincinnati hospital was the one that took care of Damar Hamlin, and thank God, his miraculous recovery that is occurring. When they decided to postpone the game and end it, there were no accounts of people throwing beers and upset, saying, "We paid money for these tickets, where will our refund be?" There was no accounts of people screaming in the parking lot saying, "How dare they, this game needs to be played." Instead, people bowed their head and they prayed together, silently or in formal prayer, depending on their religion and their background, for the health of this player, most of whom never knew his name beforehand. While indeed it was a scary moment, it was a painful moment to watch, it was scary as a sports fan, there was something strangely and powerfully comforting about our unity in that moment. Most people put on that game and they were leaning one direction or the other. I hope Cincy wins. I hope Buffalo wins. I hope this team gets home field advantage. I hope this will be a rematch in a few weeks during the playoffs. And by the end, none of that mattered. What mattered was the health of one sweet, innocent man who was in a freak accident and almost lost his life. And thank God, all of these systems worked together to respond, and it looks like to save him and to heal him, and may he continue to be healed. He had a charity that he started in Pittsburgh to help kids who didn't have toys. It raised about $35,000 before he was injured. As of last night, it raised $8 million in just the last 5 days, and still growing. Who are the people who made donations? Well, the two biggest zip codes or area codes that were part of founding this and funding this were from Buffalo and Cincinnati. And then the rest of the world also all supported this. The #1 selling jersey in the NFL this year, Damar Hamlin. Why? Because everyone went out and bought a Damar Hamlin jersey this week, regardless if they're a Bills fan, a Cincy fan, a Giants fan, a Jets fan, a Bucks fan, a Dolphins fan. They went out and showed unity and support. The coach of the Bengals said that he was in awe of Sean McDermott, the coach of the Bills, who said, "I cannot continue to coach this game. I need to be in the hospital with my player." Meaning, if the game goes on, someone else will coach it, but I'd prefer if the game be suspended because I can't be here right now. Transcending his responsibility and realizing what was bigger in the moment. Yes, it was horrible to watch. Yes, we don't wish that upon our worst enemy, to be in such a situation of fright and scare and near loss of life. But that moment of gathering together, that moment of unity, that moment that transcended, is a moment that has hugged me, and I think given our entire nation a sense of hope and balm. I want you all to juxtapose that to the second most watched item on TV this week. And that, of course, was the election of a new Speaker of the House in the United States Congress. Now, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're independent, I don't care if you're not a voting citizen of the United States of America. What we saw were two groups that could not see within the other one spark, one gleaming moment of humanity on the other side. We saw a group of Democrats that were gloating and celebrating in figurative popcorn in the dysfunction of their political opponents on the other side of the aisle. We saw political opponents who were supposedly on the same team who couldn't agree that the color blue is blue. They couldn't find common ground on the simplest of things. And instead of saying all of the things that they agreed upon, they would pick the 1, 2, 3, or 5 things that were their differences, and there they would put a stake in the ground and air their grievances for all to see. Even last night, in the memory of July 6th, 2 years ago, Congress people almost came to fisticuffs on the floor because of votes or lack of votes that happened at 11:30 p.m. And then take it a step further, that yesterday afternoon there was a memorial for the events of January the 6th. And in those events, the Congress people were invited to participate and have a moment of silence for police officers who lost their life defending the Capitol, and for those who had suffered traumatic injury during that time. Every Democrat came to the steps, and only one Republican chose to come. Now again, I don't care what side you're on, but do we really have to divide moments where people have been hurt or we're memorializing based on political affiliation? I am a big fan of history and politics, so I love to study about presidents. And recently I was watching a documentary about George W. Bush, president number 43. And he was talking about the nature of his father, George H.W. Bush, president 41, close relationship with Bill Clinton. And they asked President 43 Bush, why do you think your dad had such a close relationship with Bill Clinton? They were different political people. They were even political opponents who ran against each other. And Bush 43 said there were two reasons why. One when Bill Clinton won the election over George H.W. Bush, he never gloated in his victory. And secondly, the first thing he did on his first weeks in office is he called George H.W. Bush to ask for advice and counsel. And George shared it with him. And from that moment on, they shared counsel and they grew in their friendship. And at the end of both of their presidencies, they spent a lot of time doing activities that were going to help all Americans. They really didn't see divide between each other. And Bill Clinton was famously known for saying loudly and proudly on many occasions about how much he loved, adored, and respected George H.W. Bush. It really was a powerful and a beautiful moment between the two. I'm old enough to remember a relationship that existed between the Speaker of the House, a proud Democrat, Tip O'Neill, and the President of the United States, a proud Republican, Ronald Reagan, who disagreed ferociously on all types of issues, but who really broke bread and shared time together so that they could find common ground. I also remember in my history and in learning that it was Richard Nixon who, when he received just the nomination to be the presidential nominee for the Republican Party, spent weeks at LBJ's ranch in Texas so that he could be prepared and primed should he win the election. Now, they were on two different sides of the political aisle. In fact, LBJ beat Nixon earlier. But here they were, sitting at his ranch, talking about the future together. But somehow or another, that changed. Kennedy would call Eisenhower regularly to consult him for help when it came to Cuba, Bay of Pigs, or many other things. And we all just saw a few weeks ago Speaker Boehner's beautiful tribute to Speaker Pelosi, where he had the brilliant line of saying, "We disagreed on so much, Nancy, but we were never disagreeable." And he hugged her and he kissed her again. I don't know if such a picture could happen today. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, President Obama came to work with, at the time, Governor Chris Christie. Two people who I liked the way they both governed. As an American, I liked the way Obama governed. Not every way, but many ways. And as a New Jerseyan, I like the way Christie governed. Not every way, but in many ways. And when President Obama came to work with Christie and talk about ways that the government was going to help, Chris Christie said goodbye to him as he got on Marine One, and he gave him a hug in a bro form, where you shake hands and grab a shoulder. And Chris Christie was lambasted for weeks and months when he decided to run for president. How dare you hug President Obama? We heard the same thing a few months ago after there was a terrible hurricane on the west coast of Florida, and President Biden went down to work with Governor DeSantis. How can they work together? How can they shake hands? How can they stand side by side? What foolishness is this, people? So here we are watching a sports event between two passionate rivals, and we see a moment that, no pun intended, defibrillates the country together to share a common rhythm and heartbeat with empathy, compassion, understanding, love, regardless of which team you root for. No one said when Damar Hamlin got hurt, "Oh good, one of their star players is hurt, now we have a better chance of winning." That wasn't the response of a single soul, nor should it be. And meanwhile, in the political theater, on the political field, that is indeed the way that they are acting. When a player or a congressperson is hurt or has to have a surgery or can't be present or can't make a vote or wants to hold it over someone's head, the other side, regardless of the side, gloats and celebrates in the moment of the demise of one of their groups. Is this the way that our country should be working? Is this the way that the world should be wired? Two moments on the screen for America to watch. One that galvanizes us, one that buoys us, one that gives us hope, and one that takes a pin and lets all the air out of the balloon. And we hear that shriek in that sound, and it makes our spine shiver. I spoke a few minutes ago to Jack and to Ryder about the importance of carrying the bones of our ancestors, about the importance of giving blessings to Ephraim and Manasseh with our hands on their head. And what we realize is that we have a responsibility in creating a life and a world that our children will inherit. I inherited a world that was proud of political difference that was just that, a political difference, but not a human difference. A political difference between Reagan and O'Neill, between Bush and Clinton, between Nixon and LBJ, or whoever else it might be, and to see that they might be from different sides of the political aisle, but still in the same game. And I inherited that world and want my kids to inherit the world that they saw in the wake of the Damar Hamlin tragedy on the field. But what do we do when they flip the channel from Damar Hamlin and it goes to NBC, CBS, Fox, or CNN, and they see the dysfunction of our political world and our elected officials? What do we do when that happens? Are we carrying the bones of our ancestors? What would Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, LBJ, George H.W. Bush all do and say to see this level of political strife? We have a decision to make, all of us. We're not just spectators in the game. We are respondents. And if we were respondents in the game that sit by idly and do nothing, or call for the game to continue in the wake of a person being so critically injured on the field, then we lose our humanity. And so too, we are respondents and constituents when we see this happening in our political world. And if we're carrying the bones of our ancestors, then we need to do so in a way that offers a sense of pride, grace, value for what we believe in. We should have political debate. We should celebrate different opinions. Judaism is all about those vibrant conversations that live between the right and the left, between Hillel and Shammai. No one is discounting those debates. But what we are discounting is the demonization of the other and the celebration of the hurt and demise of another group. Because it's not about the group that's hurt in the end. It's about all of us that hurt. On this Shabbat, let us all think of our responsibility, of the bones that we carry in memory. And are we making those memories proud of our behaviors? May we continue to act in a way that brings our responsibility to a place where we can unify with a shared rhythm and shared heartbeat about our future, celebrating rivalry and difference, but rising above to see the beauty in every life and the hope and potential that all of us bring. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.